Welcome to the podcast that must not be named. I'm Melissa.
I'm Luke.
And we are here to talk about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 2, entitled The Vanishing Glass. This particular chapter was 13 pages long and comprises 4.21% of the entire book total. Luke, take it away on the executive summary.
10 years after The Boy Who Lived was left on the Dursleys' doorstep, a neglected Harry wakes up from a reoccurring dream involving a flying motorcycle in his tiny, spider-inhabited dungeon cupboard under the stairs, only to be reminded that it is his incredibly spoiled and whiny cousin Dudley's birthday. Even though there is no sign around the house that Harry even exists, we learn that he is quite skinny, has messy jet black hair and bright green eyes, which are behind taped up glasses, and a thin lightning bolt shaped scar on his forehead. Dudley, a fat boy that Harry describes as looking like a pig in a wig, opens his absurd amount of birthday presents while Harry is forced to cook the bacon and fry eggs. Much discussion occurs in front of Harry, as though he doesn't even exist, between Mr. Dursley, who is finally given a first name of Vernon, and Petunia on where to leave Harry for the day while the rest of the family go to the zoo. It is insinuated that it is Harry's fault that, 1, Mrs. Figg, who usually watches Harry and bores him to death with photo albums filled with her past and present cats in her cabbage-smelling living room, has a broken leg and cannot watch him. 2, Aunt Marge can't watch him since she hates him. 3, Petunia's friend Yvonne is in Majorca. 4, he will not be allowed to stay at home where he may burn the house down. And 5, he won't be allowed to stay in the car at the zoo because it is a new car. Obviously. Therefore, the Dursleys, all out of options, decide that he will join them on their trip to the zoo along with Dudley Diddydums and his friend Piers Polkiss. This trip is a real treat for Harry since he has never been allowed to do anything enjoyable. The Dursleys strictly forbid questionings or mentionings of anything that is considered out of the normal, so Harry is warned that any funny business during the day trip will earn Harry a 6-month or more cupboard imprisonment, even though the past funny businesses that have happened around Harry are quite unexplainable. Harry has no idea how, after being sheared, his hair grows back overnight, how one of Dudley's old, hideous sweaters shrunk to the size of a hand puppet's accessory as Petunia tried forcing it over his head, or, as Harry was being chased by Dudley's gang, found himself on the school's roof. Harry shares a portion of his reoccurring dream about the flying motorcycle with the family and almost causes a car crash. While at the zoo, Harry lucks out in getting a few desserts before the Dursleys head to the reptile house. Dudley quickly finds the largest snake in the zoo, a Brazilian boa constrictor, and annoyingly raps on the glass before becoming bored and moving on from the inactive snake. Harry quickly develops a chit-chat relationship with the snake. Yes, Harry can somehow talk to snakes, unbeknownst to himself. Piers notices the snake being active and quickly calls Dudders over to see, at which time the glass vanishes, confusion ensues, and the snake escapes. Not before thanking his new amigo Harry. After being apologized to by the zoo staff, the Dursleys call it a day and head home. On the car ride home, Piers mentions that Harry had been talking to the snake prior to the glass vanishing. This revelation earns Harry an indefinite stint locked in his cupboard. While in solitary confinement, Harry tries to remember his parents and can only come up with a foggy vision of a green light, which is accompanied by a burning feeling in his scar, which he assumes is from the car crash that killed his parents. Although he does remember several odd instances where random strangers seem to know him, one had even shaken his hand. After all of these encounters, the strangers seem to quickly disappear as if they were glass in the reptile room.
So in this particular chapter, we had several new characters appear. The first one is not a new character, but it is a character that we have now named, unlike the podcast.
A character that has been named.
Has been fully named, and that would be Mr. Dursley is Mr. no longer, and he is now Uncle Vernon Dursley. Another character is Auntie Marge, who I am not sure how she's an auntie, but Auntie Marge is there.
Yeah, who's Aunt? We don't know.
No idea. Also,
maybe she's actually an insect ant.
There's a U in it. It's
definite U.
Spelled like the
Definite
familial member of
Audiobook
the family.
listeners might not catch that.
Okay, A-U-N-T, Aunt Marge. There's also Mrs. Fig, the annoying old lady neighbor who babysits Harry when he's not allowed to be left at home for fear of blowing up his own house.
Who loves cats and cabbage, apparently.
Right, but especially cats.
Lots of cats.
And stale cake.
And stale cake.
Stale cake is not
stale
good.
Cabbage cake. Maybe that's what the problem is.
I don't even know where to go with that.
Another character that we are introduced to is Petunia's friend Yvonne, the gallant traveler going to Majorca, Spain. Sounds delightful.
Sure. The only other character we actually meet and talk to is Piers Polkiss. We do have a mention of his mother dropping him off as she probably ran quickly for the door to try and leave. But Piers actually gets to attend the zoo trip along with his friend Dudley.
Some locations that we are introduced to are the zoo. We don't know which one. It's not specified.
My personal favorite thing about the zoo is that in Luke's notes, he listed that if you're interested in a zoo, the St. Louis Zoo here in Missouri is one of the top 3 zoos in the country. But unlike the Lincoln Zoo and the San Diego Zoo, our zoo is free.
Which doesn't cost anything either.
And we were not paid for that endorsement.
Yet.
And the zoo is really the only new location because we're just at Privet Drive, which we've seen before. That's not new.
And the car doesn't count.
No, because it's a traveling location.
Traveling location.
It's a traveling location. Like it's a place, but not really a place.
How does transportation get categorized in a location?
Well, it's a noun.
Do we have to consider every road that they turned on? Every intersection?
I'm thinking in like terms of, standard English grammar. It's a noun because it's a thing. It's a car, but it moves.
Yes, it is a thing.
And you can be in it. So therefore it makes it a bit of a location. So kind of aware. Like, where were you? I was in the car.
Right.
I don't know. But where was your car? Your car could have been
Mr. Dursley
anywhere.
was in the car earlier. We didn't mention that last chapter.
Also true.
So, for chapter 1, location, Mr. Dursley's car.
Again.
11 years ago.
10 years ago.
10 years ago. This could
born.
be a new car. Knowing the Dursleys, this
it was
is a new car.
It specifically said the car was new.
Right.
This is a
Which is
different
why
car.
Harry cannot sit in it because it's a new car.
If
You
they
can't
had the old one.
let that kid sit in a car all day because it's new? Come on.
Mhm.
So we'll go directly into our in-depth notes.
All right, so my very first thought on this chapter and just Harry's life in general. First of all, it just sounds miserable. He sounds just, I think you could not get more depraved unless you were homeless or in foster care. And God bless those people and those of you who have grown up in that situation. More power to you. I was blessed to have a very good family and
I was as well.
being the same family. However, Harry's world is just abysmal. Nothing says that more than the fact that his room was a closet. Not even like a full closet. It was a closet under the stairs. So
You're missing the top corner of a closet.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't even, it's not even a full closet.
No.
You're missing your roof. You're missing your ceiling.
Could there be any worse room than a closet?
That's a good question. Let me step in on this one. Like we discussed a minute ago, we definitely grew up in a very loving, very good family.
Having said that, as Luke's older sister, I will let you know that as growing up, he didn't have a room.
There were 6 kids in our family, and there were 5 total bedrooms, if you push it, which we did, because we had to, which meant me being the youngest for a long time, didn't have a room to myself and or really share a room. I kind of bounced around a bit.
He did. It was really funny. Poor Luke. Luke, who doesn't have a room. It's still a joke in the family now. He has a whole house now, though. He'll be fine.
That same house. I actually have that house now.
That's right. You do live in our parents' old
house. Which is where we're recording this.
Which is funny.
With that being said, I can't even come close to comparing to what it must be like growing up with your only outlet, your only room.
Sanctuary.
Being underneath the stairs.
To get away from this family who just treats you like you don't exist. There are no pictures of you there. And it's not like this is a family who doesn't do pictures, because obviously Dudley is just bowed down to in his...
And not to mention he's bowed down to at school.
Oh, yeah.
Where it doubles down on Harry not having any friends because everyone's afraid of upsetting Dudley and his gang.
Yes.
So not only is his at-home life just terrible, it doesn't get any better at school because he has the same problems that get transferred there just through sheer influence.
I'm going to jump on that because let's talk about Dudley for a second. That boy needs some parenting.
Yeah.
Let me just throw that out there. I do really appreciate JK's brilliance in showing just how manipulative of a kid he is. I am a math teacher, so for me, the fact that she used a math problem to sort of show this with his birthday presents. So Dudley struggled to add 37 plus 2. I have 37, so if I get 2 more, how many does that make it?
Oh,
and you can hear
boo-hoo.
him whining, and he's so sad. And of course, his parents, who jump in and save him on everything, immediately tell him it's 39. But here's the thing. Right before that, he was able to count and say, hey, this is 36, and that's 2 less than last year. He immediately did that mental math and subtracted. First of all, remember the 38 from a year before. I have no idea how many presents I got, or I couldn't even tell you what I had for dinner
16.
Yesterday. Right.
Salisbury steak. Next.
I got nothing. So
Neither of those are true. Neither of those are true.
Of course they're not. So my point is, here's this kid who can obviously remember figures year to year, who can obviously mentally subtract 38 minus 36 quickly, who then can't then add 2 back on later. That is such a manipulation of the parents. And he knows it. And they jump in. That's how he gets what he wants all the time, because he seems like a very smart kid. Later on in the chapter where he's crying about Harry has to come with me to the zoo, his friend shows up and bam, he is fine. Let's go. My friend's here. Turned it off completely. And Harry knows it because he even called him out and said, I don't think Dudley's cried for real in years. So Harry sees it and has that realistic view of what this kid is doing to his parents. But what parents let your kids get away with that? That's just awful.
That's terrible. I'm looking at my book for what specifically it says. So Aunt Petunia looked as though she'd just swallowed a lemon. And come back and find the house in ruins, she snarled. I won't blow up the house, said Harry, but they weren't listening. I suppose we could take him to the zoo, said Aunt Petunia slowly, and leave him in the car. That's a new car. He's not sitting in it alone.
See? New car.
Dudley began to cry loudly. In fact, he wasn't really crying. It had been years since he'd really cried, but he knew that if he screwed up his face and wailed, his mother would give him anything he wanted.
Do you think that if Vernon had a different wife, that he's, I don't know, I'm a little torn on this because I've always disliked Vernon. I always thought he was like the big alpha male, terrible dad. There's just been a couple things like that. I'm like, maybe it's Petunia. Maybe she's the one feeding into this. She's the one who's coddling this boy. I wonder if Vernon had a wife who maybe was a little stricter or a little better on the discipline, if he would just back her on that.
Right, because we do, like you were saying, we do learn in chapter 1 that Vernon is terrified of telling or mentioning to Petunia that he maybe even heard something related to what might be the Potters. He does not want to talk to her about this at all. And what we just read, it is clearly Dudley's mother that will give him anything he wants. But we don't know that Vernon is nearly the enabler. He definitely is a big alpha male who quickly crumbles in front of his wife.
Yes.
Is what I think.
Well, and I also think he is very much one of the lead instigators of the child abuse against Harry. Obviously, he doesn't like Harry. My question is just, does that dislike start with him and then feed to Petunia? Does it start with Petunia and then feed to him? Who really is the person sort of controlling the way the children are? But I definitely feel like there might be one parent that is sort of leading the perception of how these two children are being raised. And I'm just saying throughout, I mean, I've read these books. I started reading them in the year 2000. I've read them every year since. So I've read them 16 plus times. I've always thought that Vernon was the guy calling all these shots. And just this time through, I'm like, well, maybe it's Petunia. Maybe she's the one who is just, she didn't like her sister. She didn't like the husband. They never met the kid. Now she gets stuck with this kid. So maybe she's like forcing all of that onto him. And then in exchange, taking all of the happiness into Dudley, saying, okay, well, but at least my kid. And Vernon goes along with it.
With her being described as being such a nosy neighbor, I do think that she is the one that is so worried about perception.
Yes.
That it likely does come back to her being afraid of anybody finding out. And that transfers to Vernon. That's the way I'm seeing. And I agree. I always thought that Vernon was more the instigator on all of this, basically Harry being thrown onto his perfect family.
Right.
But I think he just wants to keep Petunia happy. I think his main goal is to keep Petunia happy. Happy
or keep from rocking her boat.
That's a better point.
So the debate about the evilness or the insanity of Vernon and Petunia will rage on for another time. So going back, we're going to continue our discussion of Petunia and Vernon and their inability to raise any kind of children as we go on. I only have 2 or 3 more points in just sort of my notes. The first one is talking to snakes is cool. Like, it kind of creeps me out, but I know my favorite place to go in the zoo is the reptile house. So I think that's kind of cool that Harry gets to talk to him, and I wonder if that's going to be something we see more of, because that's really neat.
Yeah, I agree. Talking to snakes is pretty cool. And for me personally, I did grow up being terrified of snakes and terrified of spiders. And so the fact that in this chapter we quickly learn that Harry sleeps in a cupboard under the stairs filled with spiders and then befriends snakes, this was revolutionary for my life. So this changed my life a little bit.
All right. And so the last 2 things I want to bring up are for our friends who are, number one, not from the 20th century, but have been born in the 21st century, because there was something Harry mentioned in Dudley's presence called a VCR, which is a very old invention, from when I was younger, where you would put a giant tape into this machine and you'd have to rewind it to the beginning of the tape and it would play movies on your TV. Sort of like a DVD player now, except that you couldn't just click which chapter you wanted. You have to wait for it to rewind.
Be kind, rewind.
Oh, yes. The last thing I wanted to give out for you, specifically people in the U.S. who may not know, and I had to look it up, is what a Knickerbocker Glory is, which is what Harry was able to finish when Dudley's first one didn't have enough ice cream. And it is a treat from the British Isles, or from the United Kingdom, that is a tall glass that is filled with ice cream, fruit, and meringue, and then, so layers of those over and over again, and on top with whipped cream, nuts, and a cherry. And if you're not hungry now, well, then you should be.
I'm hungry now.
Good.
What's the difference between ice cream and cream?
Well, I thought it was more like whipped cream.
But then there's whipped cream on top. But then whipped cream
was on top, so I just left it with cream. That was according to Wikipedia, and I went with it. It's also categorized by a very distinct long spoon.
Okay, well, if it's in a tall glass, you'd have to.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like a tall tumbler.
It reminds me of our great aunt Sini. She used to have those really tall glass sort of ice cream serving dishes, but they're really skinny, and she'd have long spoons. So it just reminds me of that, except we wouldn't layer basically fruit and meringue or like a jam kind of thing into it. That's what threw me off. Any notes that you had that you wanted to share before we get to our 5 questions?
Yeah, definitely. I hear Majorca's nice. That's it.
Traveling is fun.
Traveling is fun.
Yeah.
Mrs. Fig sounds terrible. I'm not a fan of cats.
No, you're not.
I'm allergic to cats.
As is everyone else who lives in my house besides me. So I'm not allowed to have them.
But it does sound terrible to live or to be watched by a woman who shows you photo albums of cats.
Dead cats.
Of cats, past and present.
Dead cats.
Are they actually dead at the photos?
I don't think the photos are of dead cats, but like it's kind of depressing to look through. Hey, I had this cat. He died 3 years ago.
Here's
hey,
the cat I had
cat.
12 years ago.
Right.
Because she might be really old. She might be incredibly old.
She might be. Is there a Mr. Fig? I mean, it's Mrs. Fig. I assume there's
Is
a
his
Mr.
name
Fig. No, that would be backwards. It wouldn't be Newton Fig.
Well, when they call roll call in class,
yes.
is Fig Newton? Here?
Just for all our listeners, there is no Newton Fig in this chapter, and as far as I know, there is no Mr. Fig. It's just Mrs. Fig. So
my third note is that must have been some serious wind gust near Surrey, which is where Privet Drive is, and I'm assuming their school is close to there.
Right.
For Harry to justify ending up on the roof by being caught in this said wind. For him to end up on the roof, that's going to be a pretty healthy gust. That or Harry is really not good at realizing how much he weighs and how wind works.
Well, have you ever seen wind carry a kid up? Ever?
No.
So in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, so one, it has to be a single story school. It has to be like there.
He ended up on the chimney. He was sitting on the chimney.
That's true. Okay, so single story school with the chimney, which means there's a fireplace inside. I'm almost picturing he was hiding behind the trash bins. Is that correct?
He was jumping to hide behind
That's
the
right.
trash
I almost
bins.
feel like there was almost like a springboard action with the trash can lids, and they must have added some sort of trampoline type figure.
With the something action, Buzz Lightyear.
Karate chop action.
With karate chop action.
He was doing the karate chop action.
I'm going to read. So this is what the book says.
On the other hand, he got into terrible trouble for being found on the roof of the school kitchens. Dudley's gang had been chasing him as usual when, as much to Harry's surprise as anyone else's, there he was sitting on the chimney. The Dursleys had received a very angry letter from Harry's headmistress telling them Harry had been climbing school buildings, but all he tried to do, as he shouted at Uncle Vernon through the locked door of his cupboard, was jump behind the big trash cans outside the kitchen doors. Harry supposed that the wind must have caught him mid-jump.
It's a heck of a wind.
That's quite the wind.
That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
So that was my third note.
All right.
My fifth note, as Melissa mentioned earlier, was the St. Louis Zoo is awesome, and this is not a paid advertisement.
It's just that good.
It's just that good, and it is free. So here are my 5 burning questions moving forward. How might the child abuse or neglect Harry has grown up with affect his future relationships with adults?
I kind of feel like it could go either way. It could either be he will never trust another adult ever, or it could be that he is working he'll be working really hard to make as many connections as possible. He'll sort of latch on to any adult who shows him the time of day. You notice that with kids a lot in schools. Like, even if they have really good parents, sometimes there are just teachers that they connect with, and, you know, he's in school, and if he ever gets away from his terrible family at any time, because right now he never is away from them. He is always with either Dudley or Vernon or Petunia. Always. They don't allow him anywhere else. But if he ever gets the chance to break away, he will either reject everything or latch on to anything he can find. There is going to be no gray area.
I agree, and we'll see where it heads in the future, I guess. My second question: could Harry's familiarity with creepy-ish creatures like spiders and snakes, as I mentioned before, provide him any benefit in the future?
No, they're weird and gross. I don't like them. I have nothing more to say on the subject.
Agreed. Number 3: could Piers Polkiss potentially not hate Harry? Or is he just observant? So this question came up when Piers is the one that notices the snake being active and Harry is right there. So my question is, he's clearly looking around. Is he just randomly looking around, or is he actually checking on Harry knowing that he is always at the end of Dudley's fist?
I think it might be a little bit of both. These are 11-year-old boys. 11-year-old boys do not sit still. 11-year-old boys don't focus on very much. 11-year-old boys are very all over the place. Now, does that mean they're necessarily always going to observe everything? Not necessarily. So his focus was probably kind of jumping, but Harry is probably something that he does tend to keep an eye out for, because early in the chapter it said that he's the kind of kid who's going to hold Harry's arms back. So he's probably always looking for the chance to do that. He doesn't seem like the kind of kid who would, if it weren't for Dudley, would pick on Harry. He probably is a little scrawny kid or a smaller guy, a very follower kind of guy, who on his own might be okay, or at least not quite as big of a jerk.
It's only Dudley's peer pressure that brings peers' pressure into it.
Well, I don't necessarily think he's necessarily a good guy. I'm just saying he's the kind of bad guy that won't be a bad guy by himself. He needs a bigger, stronger guy to hide behind. So, but for him, one of the things that puts him in the good graces of Dudley is to point out Harry's faults. So why not? Hey, here's another thing we can make fun of him for. Here's another thing we can beat him up for, because if we beat up Harry, you won't beat up me. I'll still be on your good side.
I'm going to try to give him the benefit of the doubt on this one.
That's nice of you.
It is nice of me. I'm a pretty nice guy right now. And I think he was looking around, and he doesn't really have a reason to hate Harry aside from trying to be on Dudley's good side. So similar to what you were saying, I don't think he really hates Harry at all. It's just beneficial for him in Dudley's friendship to be an accessory to Dudley's bullying of Harry.
See, and I disagree with that, because I feel like because he has been so ingrained, I mean, they've been together, Dudley and Harry have been together for 10 years. So Piers has been friends with them since whatever they start school at, maybe 5 years old. So we're talking 6 years of this abuse. Maybe when they were 5 and 6, he didn't hate Harry, but it's become so a part of his person that I truly believe that there is not one person in that school that they go to who 20 years down the line won't still think of Harry Potter as, oh, that annoying kid that we beat up. Not because I'm trying to say on Dudley's side, but because Dudley has brainwashed them all into thinking that he is weird and little and scrawny. Like, that's what kids do, is they pull him into the pack, and they've decided. Even if one person decides this is the kid we hate, they all just hate him. That's just the way it is. It might be different if it weren't for that, but he doesn't hate Harry so that Dudley will like him. He hates Harry because Dudley hates Harry. Therefore, he hates him, and that's just the emotion.
Okay. My fourth question is, blinding green light mean anything to you?
No, but that sure doesn't seem like anything I've seen in a car crash. And having been in them, I've never seen a green light.
Yeah. Number 5. Who are all of these strangers that clearly seem to know Harry?
That one I have an answer for. At the end of chapter 1, McGonagall and Dumbledore got into an argument about why Harry should or should not be left at the Dursleys. And McGonagall's argument was, well, everybody will know him. And here, these are, these crazy people. And Dumbledore was like, yes, that's why, because he's going to grow. Everybody will know him. He will be in all the books. Can you imagine growing up with that sort of famous pressure? Well, those are the people who have read those books. And I mean, everybody in the story, the entire country full of whatever this people were celebrating the fact that he lived. So he is famous. He was in history books before he even could read history books. And because he has such a distinguishing scar, he's very easy to pick out. So I think that those are the crazy people.
You might be right. So, Melissa, what was your favorite line in this chapter?
Well, I had 2 very favorite lines. But when you look at the notes, Luke and I actually had similar favorite lines. So I'm going to give him the line. This is your episode to kind of run. So I'm going to let you do our top line, and then I'll give you my backup.
Okay. So both of our favorite line, and in this case, I guess kind of an honorable mention for line. Petunia often said, Dudley looked like a baby angel. Harry often said that Dudley looked like a pig in a wig.
Such a great line.
It is a great line.
1, because there is no better way to describe what Dudley looks like than that. And 2, it really shows sort of like Petunia's view versus Harry's view, and sort of Harry's humor.
We also get a little bit of
later on.
We start getting some of Harry's actual personality. I mean, it is the first chapter that we meet Harry, obviously, but his personality is already kind of starting to show through. So that's nice.
So my backup line that I came with is when the Dursleys and Harry and Piers are driving to the zoo. And it says, while he drove, Uncle Vernon complained to Aunt Petunia. He liked to complain about things. People at work, Harry, the council, Harry, the bank, and Harry were just a few of his favorite subjects. This morning, it was motorcycles.
So there's three Harrys?
3 Harrys.
So 3 out of his 5 top favorite things are Harry
Yes.
to complain about?
Yes.
That's healthy.
Right. Let's really complain the most about, this person whose life I am in charge of raising and developing and growing. Good job.
They're terrible.
They are.
For the chapter MVP, even though we had our discussion in the 5 questions, I am still going to give the chapter MVP to Piers Polkiss. I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he isn't as bad as we think. And as you mentioned a few times, if Dudley wasn't around, they could possibly be neutral or even friends. And I do think Piers is aware of that, and he may have actually been looking around and noticed that Harry was, actually getting the stuff that Dudley wanted to happen. So I don't know. I'm gonna leave Piers Polkiss as my chapter MVP.
My honorable mention goes to the snake,
It's a good
which
one.
I believe counts because he speaks.
He has a speaking role. If he was in a movie, he would be credited and he would get a paycheck.
Well, the voice actor would. So I'm going to give it to the snake. 1, because he is. How often do any creature, if you will, interact in a positive way with Harry? It obviously doesn't happen at school. It doesn't happen at home. It doesn't happen with Mrs. Fig. So the only time he gets any positive interaction is with those strangers on the street. Or this snake. So this is all the strangers on the street we've only seen in third person, hey, this used to happen.
And they disappear as soon as he takes a closer look. So he never has an actual relationship or conversation with them. Not even an acquaintance, really.
Really, they're just glances, like, hey, this person saw me or whatever. But the snake has a conversation. Granted, it's mostly through gestures and eye rolls, but we can have conversations through our body language and facial expressions. It happens all the time. And so he has this conversation where Harry is not the bad guy. He's not this hated person. And he ends up helping out the snake. And he is appreciated for it because he says thanks. So, snake, honorable mention.
Thanks, amigo.
That's right. All right, everyone. Well, that is our Chapter 2 summary. Thank you for joining us, all of you invisible podcast listeners out there. Next time, we will be journeying on to Chapter 3, The Letters from No One. We'll see you then. Thanks.